Welcome everyone to lesson 2 on multifunctionality and sustainability. So, before we start with this lesson, let's take a moment to look back at what we learned in the previous lesson. In lesson 1, we explored the foundations of multifunctionality in agriculture. So, we saw that farming is not just about producing food and fiber, it's about much more. So, agriculture also protects the environment, sustains rural jobs, and keeps cultural tradition alive. So then we introduce the idea that agriculture provides what we can call ecosystem services, essential benefits such as clean water, fertile soils, pollination, biodiversity, and even cultural identity. So all of these services remind us that every farm contributes not only to markets but also to society and to the planet. We then follow the historical development of the content of the concept of the multifunctionality concept. So during the 1980s and 1990s, growing concern about environmental degradation and rural decline led to a major policy shift. So governments and international organizations, particularly the European Union, FAO, and OECD began to recognize that agriculture performs multiple functions. So it provides food, but also manage landscapes, support communities, and helps maintaining ecological balance. Then we saw the multifunctionality entered both the European and global policy frameworks. So we saw the European Commission in 1988 report and also the World Trade Organization. So all of these debates, some countries defended the multifunctionality as a legitimate way to protect rural economies and the environment, while other countries argued that subsidies should be reduced and that agriculture should follow the same rules as any other sector. Then finally, at the end of the first lesson, we introduce the two main perspectives that help us interpret the concept. So this descriptive view, which says that multifunctionality is a natural feature of agriculture, so it already exists because farming produce both private and public goods, and normative view which treats multifunctionality as a policy good, some something governments and institutions should actively promote to achieve sustainability and social well-being. So, to summarize all these concepts, multifunctionality means that agriculture is economic, environmental, and societal, social, sorry, at the same time. So it's connected production with protection and market value with community value. So in this second lesson, we will explore how multifunctionality and sustainability are linked. Over the past 2 decades, sustainability has become one of the central priorities in agriculture, and for good reason. So, climate change, soil degradation, biodiversity loss, and water scarcity have shown us that food production cannot be separated from environmental care. Multifunctionality gives us a framework to respond to all these challenges. It shows that agriculture can and must serve several goals at once to feed people, to protect ecosystem, and to sustain rural lives. So during this lesson, We will see how this transition happened in Europe and beyond, how organic and agroecological farming became key examples of sustainable multifunctionality, and how concepts such as ecosystem services and landscape level multifunctionality help us understand farming as a part of a wider ecological and social system. Let's now see multifunctionality and the shift towards sustainability. Let's move into 2000s, a real turning point in the history of European agriculture. This was the decade when environmental and social concerns pushed farming towards a new and urgent priority: sustainability. After the policy reforms of the 1990s, it became increasingly clear that agriculture could not longer be measured only by how much it produced food. It also had to be judged by how it produced, by the impacts it had on nature, rural territories, and people's quality of life. At that time, Europe was facing several critical problems. So soil degradation was spreading due to erosion, compaction, and the overuse of chemical inputs. Biodiversity was declining with the loss of field margins, hedgerows, and semi-natural habitats, and the rivers and groundwaters were becoming polluted by nitrates and pesticides. And many rural villages were losing population as young people left agriculture in search of other opportunities. So, all of these issues highlighted one clear message: agriculture could not survive on productivity alone. It had to protect the environment, sustain rural communities, and secure the long term health of Europe's land and water. The European Union reacted by reshaping its agriculture and environmental policies around the new sustainability agenda. Several key measures marked this transition. So, the Water Framework Directive, adopted in 2000, it introduced for the first time a unified framework of water management across all member states. So, to reduce nutrient pollution, manage irrigation more efficiently, and protect water bodies from agricultural runoff. The second measure was the agri-environmental schemes. These schemes first introduced under the 1992 Common Agricultural Policy reform and strengthening in the 2000 provide payments to farmers who voluntarily adopted environmentally friendly practices. Example included maintaining grasslands, planting hedgerows, converting to organic farming, and protecting habitats and species. Then the Nature 2000 network, established under the Birds Directive in 1979 and Habitats Directive 1992, it became fully operational in the 2000s. So many farmers were now located within Nature 2000 sites, linking biodiversity conservation with rural development. Then the support for diversification and local food systems. Through the new Rural Development Regulation, the EU encourage farmers to diversify income sources, so promoting agritourism, on-farm processing, shorter supply chains, and quality labels. So these initiatives connected farming to local culture, gastronomy, and tourism, turning agriculture into a driver of rural identity and innovation. So this period marked the start of what the European Commission called the sustainability shift, a new phase where agricultural policy were designed not only to support markets, but to deliver public goods such as clean water, biodiversity, and so on. So, in this sense, multifunctionality evolved from a theoretical concept into a policy instruments for sustainable development. It guided the transition towards agricultural systems that were productive, but also environmentally responsible and inclusive. One of the strongest and most visible tools driving the shift towards sustainability in European agriculture has been organic farming. We will talk about organic farming later, but is based on a simple but powerful idea to produce food in a way that works with nature rather than against it. So, organic farming avoids the use of synthetic pesticides, herbicides, and mineral fertilizers, instead relying on crops rotation, compost, and natural pest control. So the organic farming approach helps to maintain healthy soils, protect biodiversity, and improve animal welfare. But organic farming is not only about environmental benefits, it also supports shorter and more transparent supply chains, meaning fresh food, fresher food for consumers, more local jobs, and a closer relationship between farmers and the people they feed. From an economical point of view, organic farming helps farmers become more resilient because organic products are often sold in niche markets. Farmers can obtain premium prices that compensate for lower yields. This provides a safety net in periods of market instability and rewards farmers who invest in sustainability. Recognizing these multiple benefits, the European Union integrates organic farming into the common agricultural policy. Organic production became eligible for direct support and rural development measures, including training, certification, and conversion aids. Countries such as Austria and Denmark were early pioneers. They use organic farming to reach national goals related to biodiversity, climate mitigation, and innovation in rural areas. So both these countries today remain among the European leaders in the organic transition. In 2020, the European Commission's Farm to Fork strategy, part of the European Green Deal, set a clear set. By 2030, at least 25% of the EU agricultural land should be managed organically. This objective connects organic farming directly to the European Union's broader goals for climate neutrality, biodiversity recovery, and sustainable food systems. So, where do we stand today? According to the Eurostat's 2023, by 2022, the European Union had 17 million hectares of certified organic land, representing about 10.5% of total utilized agricultural area. Just Four countries, France, Spain, Italy, and Germany, accounts for over half of all organic farmlands in the EU. However, we look at the share organic area in relation to total farmlands. Smaller countries often led the way. So Austria 25.7%, Estonia 23.4%, and Portugal 19.3%. Meanwhile, other member states such as Malta, Ireland, and the Netherlands still show much lower percentages. In this case, the barriers are usually structural, such as limited land availability or fragmented farms, and sometimes economic, linked to um, weaker consumer demand or insufficient support systems. So these differences tell us an important lesson. There is no single model for organic transition. Even within the common EU targets, countries need tailored national strategies that reflect their geography, markets, and traditions. Organic farming illustrates perfectly how multifunctionality becomes practical reality. It is no longer a theoretical concept, but a policy slogan. Let's now zoom and see how multifunctionality works in practice, how it looks inside real sustainable farming systems. So, the idea is simple. As I said before, farming is not just about producing food, it's also about sustaining the environmental, communities, and rural health. So, from an environmental point of view, multifunctionality connects directly to agroecological principles. This means designing a farming system that works with natural processes then rather than against them. For example, agroforestry, combining trees with crops or livestock, improve soil fertility, regulate microclimate, and increase biodiversity. Then crop rotation helps to control pests and disease naturally while maintaining soil nutrients. And also diversified farms, so which integrate different species and activities, are more resilient to both markets and also climate shocks. There are some examples here. All of these practices provide multiple ecosystem services: pollination, richer and more fertile soils, cleaner water, and greater biodiversity. At the same time, they help farms become stronger and more um, adaptable to the effects of climate change, such as extreme heat, drought, or floods. From an economic point of view, multifunctionality means diversification. So instead of relying on a single crop of products, farmers integrate different activities that complement each other and reduce financial risk. For example, a dairy farm can process its milk into cheese and sell it directly to the local markets. Ivanar can open an agritourism business, offering visitors a local food experience. I will show you an example later on. A green farm can invest in renewable energy such as biogas or social panels. So this approach increases farmers' resilience to price fluctuations and market instability. From social side, multifunctionality helps preserve traditions, create inclusion, and strengthen communities. Multifunctionality supports projects such as social farming, where farms provide educational, therapeutic, or work opportunities for people with disabilities or vulnerable groups. And these activities generate both social, economic value, contributing to rural well-being and cohesion. So multifunctional farms often play a important cultural role too. They maintain a local knowledge and food heritage and rural landscape that define the identity of entire regions. One of the main frameworks that helps as achieve multifunctionality in agriculture is agroecology. Agroecology is more than just a technique, it is both a science and a practice, and in many parts of the world, it's also seen as a social movement. According to the FAO and the high level panel of experts, agroecology combines three key sources of knowledge: scientific research in agronomy and ecology, which helps us understand the natural processes and ecosystem interactions; traditional and local knowledge from farmers and rural communities who have developed sustainable ways of managing the lands over centuries; and participatory approaches that involve communities, researchers, and policymakers working together to co-design solutions adapted to each local context. So the main goal of agroecology is to design farming systems that are environmentally sound, economically valuable, and socially fair. It seeks balance between productivity and protection, and also between people and nature. So agroecology works by imitating natural ecosystems. Instead of relying on synthetic fertilizers or pesticides, it's use ecological processes, biodiversity, nutrient recycling, and soil degradation. So these maintain productivity. For instance, crop diversification helps prevent pest outbreaks. Um, Cover crops reduce erosion and enrich soil organic matter, and livestock integration improve nutrient cycles. In Europe, agroecology has gained increasing importance over the past decades. It is now recognized as a key pathway to sustainability and multifunctionality in the EU Green Deal and Farm to Fork strategy. European research projects and policies increasingly promote agroecological principles, linking food production with biodiversity conservation, landscape management, and social inclusion. So agroecology goes far beyond producing food. It also protects landscapes and rural biodiversity, creates jobs and strengthen local economies and support food. So the idea that people have the right to define how their food is produced and distributed according to their environmental, social, and cultural needs. One of the most comprehensive assessments of what as a sustainable European agriculture could look like is the 10 years of agroecology scenario, developed in 2018 by the French think tank Institute for Sustainable Development and International Relations. This research asked a simple but powerful question. What would happen if Europe fully adopted agroecology by the year 2050? What if all farms follow ecological principles, reducing inputs, restoring biodiversity, and focusing on local food systems? So this study modeled European agriculture under a set of realistic assumptions. It's proposed an ecological system agroecological system that eliminates synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, relies on crop livestock integration, crop rotations, and nitrogen fixings legumes, reintroduced permanent grasslands and hedgerows, reduced animal production to sustainable levels, and shifts European diets toward more plant-based foods and less meat and dairy. So these adjustments reflect not only the environmental goals but also public health and food security objectives. So the results were surprisingly positive. Even with lower yields per hectare, the model showed that Europe could still feed its entire population while drastically reducing environmental impacts. So, according to this model, um, as I said before, 10 years of agroecology model, biodiversity would recover across farmland thanks to the diversified cropping systems and the restored habitats. Greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture would fall by around 30%, mainly through um, lower fertilizer use and reduced livestock numbers, and grasslands would be preserved and expanded, improving carbon storage and supporting pollinators. And then for final landscape features such as hedgerows, buffer strips, and wetlands would return, reconnecting ecological corridors across rural Europe. So these changes would also reduce Europe's dependency on imported animal feed and synthetic inputs. But this scenario, the agroecology scenario, is not only about environmental. It's it also has social and cultural value by supporting smaller and diversified farms. It would revitalize rural employments and preserve traditional farming knowledge. So this scenario is a clear example of multifunctionality in action. It demonstrates that agriculture can deliver multiple benefits at once. Now, let's take a step back and look at agriculture in the bigger picture. So, farmlands covers one third of the Earth's total land area. This means that agriculture is not only influenced by ecosystems, it also shapes them. So every decision made on a farm, from crop rotation to irrigation, has consequences to soil, water, biodiversity, and even the climate. So, to help us understand these complex interactions, the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, so a landmark global study published in 2005, classified all the benefits that humans obtain from ecosystems into four main categories. The first one is the provisioning services. These are the most visible and familiar ones, the tangible goods that agriculture provides. So, food, fiber, energy, seeds, and employment. So, they represent the productive side of farming, the one that meets human needs and sustain economies. However, a system that focuses on only on provisioning without caring for the other services became unbalanced and unsustainable over time. The second category is the regulating services. These are the natural processes that keep ecosystems stable and healthy. So they include flood control, climate regulation, soil fertility, water purification, and pest control. So when managed well, agriculture reinforces these functions, for example, by using hedgerows or wetlands to reduce erosion and flooding. But intensive impulsively farming often disrupt them, leading to soil depletion, greenhouse gas emissions, and water contamination. The third category is the supporting services. These are the foundations of all other ecosystem functions. They include soil formation, nutrient cycling, and the plant productivity, sorry. All these processes that are often invisible but essential for life. The last one is the cultural services. These are perhaps the least visible, but they are equally important. They include landscape beauty, heritage, local identity, and the recreation, all the intangible values that connect people to real life. So I reported this image to help us visualize what multifunctionality really means. So at the center, we find agriculture, the core of the system. But surrounding it, we can see many connected dimensions, landscapes, ecosystem services, quality of life, and management practices. Each of these elements interact continuously with the others. So the arrows in the diagram remind us that everything is linked. Changes in one area affects also the others. For example, when a farmer decides to plant hedgerows or adopt cover crops, for example, the decision influences not only food production but also soil quality, biodiversity, and landscape beauty, and even local tourism. So the diagram is a simple but powerful reminder that agriculture is part of a much larger system, a network of ecological, social, and economic relationship. And this is exactly what multifunctionality helps us to understand. Farming decisions reach far beyond the field. They shape the environment, influence society, and contribute to the overall well being of the rural territories. So far, we have discussed multifunctionality mainly at the farm level. So, how individual farmers can combine environmental, economic, and social functions in their daily activities. But agriculture does not exist in isolation. It is part of a broader landscape. So mosaics made up of fields, meadows, forests, rivers, villages, all interacted with one with another. When we shift our perspective from the single farm to the landscape level, we start to see how the entire territory can be designed to deliver multiple benefits at once. So, food production, biodiversity, carbon storage, water irrigation, and cultural values. So, this broader approach is known as landscape level multifunctionality. It's recognized that health and productivity for a farm depends on the surrounding landscape, so the habitats, ecosystems, and communities that share the same space. One useful concept to understand this is the idea of the multifunctional mosaic. So imagine a patchwork quilt where each patch represents a different land use. Some are intensive farmlands, other are flower-rich meadows, forests, and wetlands. When these patches are combined intelligently, they can support multiple functions together, from high yields to biodiversity conservation and landscape beauty. So the key is to design the mix carefully, finding a balance that fits both ecological processes and human needs. Another important idea is called service response variance. Not all ecosystem services respond to the same way to land use intensity. For example, using fertilizers may increase yields, which improve provisioning services, but at the same time, we can reduce regulating services like water quality and pollination. So, by creating landscapes where some areas are high intensity and others are low intensity, we can reduce the conflicts. So instead of trying to make every field multifunctional on its own, we distribute functions across the territory, allowing each part of the landscape to contribute in its own way. So a well-known example comes from Germany, where researchers sorry, okay, analyze 150 grassland sites across different regions. They found that landscapes with a mix of low, medium, and high intensity areas delivered higher overall multifunctionality than any single type of management. So, in other words, variety works better than uniformity. Then, of course, multifunctionality is not just ecological, it's also social. So, different people value different aspects of the same landscape. So, farmers care about inputs and productivity, residents value scenery and peace, and visitors seek recreation and heritage. Then we have also the role of policy. So achieving landscapes level multifunctionality requires strong policy support. So governments and the European Union can promote cooperation among farmers, strengthen agri-environmental schemes, and reward on market public goods such as biodiversity, carbon storage, and cultural heritage. So, in short, shifting from field level to landscape level multifunctionality means recognizing that the strength of the rural areas lies in diversity of land use, of people, and of values in general. So, such landscapes are more resilient, more sustainable, and more inclusive. So, this is the end of this second lesson. Thank you all for your attention and engagement, and see you in the next lessons where we will talk about the economic functions and environmental functions of multifunctionality.